Welcome to Sift Tutorials. In the previous video, we created a baseline bend power curve and used it to create expected and residual power. In this video, we will use these synthesized signals to set up an analysis for power curve efficiency over time. The analysis we are covering today is based on the KPI we created in our first tutorial series. Let's have a look at Sift Explore to remind ourselves of this KPI. We used raw signal names in the definition. In the filter string, we compare signals against some thresholds. This limits our KPI to specific control regions of the turbine. We are creating one metric for efficiency in partial load, where the turbine is operating but not yet reaching rated power. The second metric is created for rated power, referred to as full load here. We can create dedicated flags for these, so they can be reused for other analyses. This ensures a consistent definition across all analyses that use these load regions. We will create these in Sift Monitor, so that we can make sure the flag names are consistent across sites. Let's create a flag for each of these control regions. We add a flag for partial load and one for full load. Set both flags to neutral and add them to our site. Then, let's set their roles by copying the filter strings from the Sift Explore KPI and substituting in variables and signal aliases. Five here does not correspond to an exact control parameter, but rather is a guideline of a pitch angle at which a turbine is no longer in partial load. Note that the transition points between the two regions are excluded from these flags. This is because transition points are not representative of the behavior in either of these regions. Save the flag configuration. Note that this does not calculate the flags yet. We navigate to Analysis Definitions, where we also set up our baseline power curve. Let's take a moment to understand this page. Here, we can quickly deploy new analyses with a consistent definition using signal aliases, variables, and the standardized flag structure. This not only makes the setup of definitions consistent, it also makes deployment of analyses and interpretation of analysis results a lot easier. The presence of a symbol in these cells shows which sites the analysis is applied in. If we want to remove an analysis from a site, for instance because it is not relevant, like tracking pitch angles on a site with stall-regulated turbines, we can simply click the bin icon in the cell. The icon in the cell gives us information about the most recent analysis run. The green tick means it was successful, and the yellow exclamation mark means the calculation was skipped. Analyses are skipped when a signal needed for them is not available. Let's add an analysis. The orange circles here mean that it has not yet been run. By default, when creating an analysis, it is added to all sites in the portfolio. Okay, let's set up this analysis to be our power curve efficiency tracker. We set it to be a user KPI, which means we have full flexibility to design the analysis as we need, as opposed to some built-in KPIs. Click the pencil to configure the KPI. First, let's define the time period on which the KPI is applied. We set this to be a relative period from the beginning of the data until the end of the last complete month. Similar to how this was set up in the first tutorial series, we add a KPI calculation to some residual power during normal operation and in partial load. Set the name of the KPI, set the source to signal, and select the alias for residual power. In the filter string, we can filter for neutral data and add our new flag. We set the statistic to be the sum and the minimum sample count to 12 to ensure noisy results due to low data coverage are not included. This KPI is to be used in a subsequent calculation in this definition, so we can untick this box to remove it from the output. We'll repeat this for our expected power signal. Note that these calculations require the selected aliases to be defined for each site, otherwise the calculation will fail. If the signal does not exist for a site, the signal not available option can be selected. If Sift Monitor is told the signal does not exist, it will essentially treat the signal as blank, still complete the calculations, and generate outputs where possible. If an alias is empty, any KPI using it will fail. Okay, now that that's been clarified, let's continue by adding the partial load power curve efficiency calculation. This KPI expression is based on the ratio between the two KPIs we just defined. The expression can be copied over from Sift Explore. Let's make sure that the names of our KPIs match. Then, we repeat these steps for full load. Finally, we define how the data in our KPI should be aggregated. We add a group for instances, as we want the output to be efficiency for each turbine. Then, another group for time, specifically year month, to see the evolution over time. Note that month does not differentiate between years, and if selected, would aggregate over all Januaries, Februaries, etc. Save the KPI, then run it. We see the calculation was successful for our example site, but not for the other two sites on the portfolio. Clicking on the red cross pulls up some logs which can help us diagnose the issue. Here, we can see the filter expression was not validated. This is because the full and partial load flags do not exist on this site. This concludes our translation from analyses built on a single site to a standardized analysis that can be applied to all projects in a portfolio. So far, we've discussed similarities and differences in turbine controls and explored how to capture the differences in a framework, such that we can better manage analyses across a whole portfolio. In the following part of this series, we will build on this by exploring how to present analysis outputs and monitor turbine performance.